Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler with a special episode of both the Reimagine podcast and That Annuity Show. We recently organized a forum in 5 parts focused on reimagining retirement in a post-COVID world. Today, we're sharing the conversation from forum number 2, building a vision of a better self in a very stressed world. Laura, now, we had a great panel. Who was on it?
We did indeed. So on the panel, we had John Cooper from Life.io, Debra Jasper with Mindset Digital, Matthew Thomas from Infosys Retirement Center of Excellence, Victor Ricciardi from Washington and Lee University, Jaqueline Bamman from Nassau Financial Group, and Rohit Puranik from Infosys moderated for us.
We had not only a good panel, we had exceptional participants. And Ramsey, you helped out tremendously. What was your biggest takeaway from that discussion?
There were so many really thoughtful things that were brought up, and a number of them hit home, for me. One of them, though, was sort of very simple, which is help those first that want assistance. And I believe it was Victor Ricciardi who had talked about that, and it immediately brought to mind a very famous line from a movie we all know, which is "Help me, help you," from Jerry Maguire.
That was it really, and it's true. We can spend a lot of time trying to help people who don't really care about the retirement plan. But what about the ones who actually are paying attention and trying to do something in a tough time like this? Okay, absolutely. Laura, on the spot, you had a lot of work that day. So what was your biggest aha moment?
I think for me, it was really talking about the currency of retirement as more than just money. I think in a lot of cases, people think of dollars and savings accounts and 401ks and the like. But I think that if people were to think more about the things they plan to do, they may be more apt to save and able to do those things.
Yeah, it's interesting. Really, what is retirement? State of mind, and that's what we spent a lot of time talking about behavioral finance and how do you create a new vision of a future self in a place like this. Now, what stuck out for me was something from Debra Jasper, which she said, you got to learn how to talk and tell these stories on a small screen. So it's creating that currency, Laura, right on my mobile phone. Ramsey, if it doesn't go in a square format or a 16 by 9 format, you may lose the audience, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the key thing, is that we are a story-driven society. Like, all of human history has been written by stories, and suddenly we're in this world where we as individuals are now learning to communicate it through a small screen. So it's already an important life skill, and that's going to continue to be the case for advisors that want to be successful.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, listen. With that, Laura, let's run the show. For joining our second session of reimagining retirement in a post-COVID world. We had a lot of debates around the title, and it was picked for various good reasons. I mean, post-COVID, as much as it feels like we're going into this horrible second wave, there's optimism, right? I think we know there's another side of the tunnel. Anyway, if you were with us for the first show and you came back for the second, thanks so much. We kept some of our audience, which is great. With different topic, it was really on investment themes, venture capital investing themes. We did record a podcast, turn it into 2 podcasts, run it on our Reimagine podcast as well as That Annuity Show. We've also got videos available on our website if you'd all like to look. It was a really good discussion, and we've got a position paper that's kind of up for circulation and comment. We've sent it out to a number of you for comments, and we'll be, probably releasing that in January. For those of you who are here for the first time, thanks so much. If you aren't familiar with our incubator, we created a niche for ourselves over the last 2 years, having sort of real-time forums in Hartford in our beautiful building, where execs like, Jackie and Tom would come and meet, and we had some real interesting conversations with other carriers. What do we do now? And so this is one of our, we've done a lot of experimentation with podcast, live streaming, virtual events. And this is kind of our next iteration of trying to build a community of people, and I say trying to find 100 people who will really, reshape retirement over the next few years. And I do firmly believe that the retirement industry is really going to change a lot as we exit the pandemic. However, what's going to happen when the industry finally gets the clear signal from the CDC? We're going to come out into a really different world. From my perspective, one is, you can see this in Google Trends. I can see this from people coming through our website and chatting with us. Demand for our products and services are actually going to be at record levels. The biggest challenge is rates are going to be at the low. And, how do we find consumer value here? That's sort of a discussion for another forum. Second, digital technology is being adopted at record levels by seniors not only in the U.S. but Canada, across the world. And I won't go into the stats, but we've seen it, real time in the way people are interacting with us. And I think most importantly, and this is kind of critical for today's discussion, is yesterday's confidence that people had about the future, bright future in their retirement, has really, I think, been fundamentally shaken to the core. And feelings, anecdotes, that's great. Just by coincidence, a day or two ago, I came across just some fascinating statistics from a company that's been doing a longitudinal poll, at least since the beginning of September, beginning of the pandemic, and they just released their latest results. And I kind of bucket them in four. The survey it's kind of an interesting measure of four fears. Fear number one is, hey, Social Security is just not going to be here when I need it. They're going to run out of money. The government's going to go broke. Survey found in July, so this is a few months into the pandemic, 4 months, 29% of Americans aged 70 and up said they were concerned about Social Security drying up. This went up to 54% in September. This month, this is like mid-November, the number was 71%. Wow. That's a big shift, in confidence of kind of bedrock of retirement. Fear number two, Jackie Bamman, I'm going to have to work until I die. I can't retire. I'm going to be here. You're going to see me forever. In May, 65% of workers said they planned to work into retirement. November number was up to 75%. The other fear you hear is, oh my gosh, I am going to get laid off before I actually want to, or I plan to retire. And we've had a lot of inquiries from media looking for quotes on the topic. We've had a lot of response from some of the work we've done here. 34% of Americans said that they're planning to change their investment strategy to keep more in cash accounts. Okay, wow, wait a second. First, what does that say? They don't have confidence in the markets. They're trying to stuff money under the mattress. Rates are at all-time low. Vic, I can't wait to hear what you think. This is just like not, interesting thinking here. Fear number four is, look, I lost my job. My business, had to shut its doors. No one's going to hire me. I'm not going to be able to make the money I made before. Now, September, 27% of the people who had been laid off said they hadn't saved anything this year. By November, this survey said 50% hadn't saved anything. So, you can imagine taking a whole year off from retirement. And worse, Matt, I'd be real interested to get your perspective as we go. 29% of 401k holders are now planning to withdraw early from the account to pay bills, is what they said, and the way they phrased the question. And, we've had a lot of questions come into us, even on our site, where we're not in the 401k business. I personally field questions about, how do I take money out of my 401k? I need it. And I don't care if I don't care about the penalty. I don't care about the loans, really. Now, Hal Hirschfeld, you probably all know him, he's very well known in the behavioral finance arena, conducted a really famous study a couple of years ago. He found that when people could imagine a clear, positive picture of themselves 10 years from now, they were more likely to favor saving over spending, defer gratification, today's gratification for a better future. Okay. Wow. So given those stats, how do we keep a generation of, pre-retirees, retirees from just, doom scrolling, until, we all, they all kind of lose their minds. How do we get them to be more optimistic again? And we got a great panel today. And there's some really interesting questions here. We already, Debra already kind of, started talking about this. Do we need to learn, at scale, how to communicate with clients over Instagram instead of a kitchen table? John from Life.io, do we need some really different types of digital tools to engage this generation thinking about, what tomorrow may look like? We in particular have done a lot of experimentation with 360 video. I hope you'll take a look at our YouTube channel later and see some of the stuff we're doing to imagine what it might be like to get people to think positively about their future. Do we need to rethink the psychology of our target market? Vic is going to bring some really interesting discussions here. And then the workplace. Really important. The workplace has been a really important arena for driving savings for retirement, either through pensions, in prior years, 401k. Jackie and Matt are, sort of talk to us about what does that future mean? Can it be more powerful? Is it going to be less powerful? Where exactly is the workplace? And so with that, I don't know, Laura, let me throw that over to you.
You had a chance to meet people that you did not know before, or reconnect with those who you haven't seen in a bit, at least in a virtual sense. Now is the time where we're going to start the panel discussion piece of this. So I am pleased to introduce the moderator for today's panel, Rohit Puranik. Rohit is portfolio head at Infosys, and the mic is now yours.
Well, thank you, Laura. Thanks a lot. And thanks, Paul, for having me here. As you can hear, it's a great topic. There are different perspectives from whoever you talk to on retirement, on savings, on pre-COVID, at COVID, and post-COVID scenarios. So we'll talk about that. It's a great panel that we have. So let me start with introducing the panel members. We have Jackie Bamman. She is the Chief People Officer at Nassau Financial Group. John Cooper, co-founder and CEO, Life.io. Debra Jasper, founder and CEO, Mindset Digital. Matt Thomas, Head of Strategy and Business Development at Infosys. And Vic Ricciardi, Visiting Assistant Professor of Finance at Washington and Lee University. So welcome all of you on this panel. What I'll do is we'll just start with some opening comments. Jackie, any opening comments for this panel?
Well, I just want to say hi to everybody, and very, very excited to be part of this really interesting discussion. Just the small breakout was telling as to how people are examining where they are today based on what has happened in the world in particular. So look forward to talking this through with everybody and addressing some of the workplace challenges that we have and focuses.
That's great, Jackie. And what I'll do is, at a part of this panel, I'll ask a couple of questions, and then we have, of course, questions from the audience that Ramsey would facilitate. So first question, let me start with John. John, you have a startup. How do you see startups playing a key role in ensuring better financial planning with the usage of data and analytics? Do you see it for more of a self-service model, especially during a pandemic, because the investment transactions are so complex? And so how do you see the startup world playing a key role there?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here, and thanks for having me. John Cooper, co-founder of Life.io. So I think the pandemic has changed everything for everyone. And I'm going to, rather than talk about startups, I'm going to talk more broadly about technology and the role technology can play in changing the role of the advisor, the way people buy. But in my mind, the two big changes, the macroeconomic changes around financial planning and life and annuity in general, one is we're seeing that complex products that, I used to have the conversation, oh, direct to consumer, that works with term, but it'll never work with more complicated products. That paradigm is changing. We know of a lot of carriers who are bringing out much more complex products, and they're building the type of interface and the type of engagement to facilitate a transaction, a much more complex sale digitally. And I think that has implications, one, to what do we think about the future of direct to consumer in the life and annuity industry, but two, also just the way advisors need to think about how they go to market, and technology playing a role as, almost decision support solutions for advisors. I'll just add two more thoughts to that. One is, part of this is a demographic shift where every demographic has become technically savvy, whereas pre-pandemic, some of the tools that we had, we'd see people in their 30s engaging with. Now we see groups in their 50s and 60s as our highest, most active users. So people are just getting more comfortable with the technology. But two, the amount of capital, the amount of innovation that has gone into InsurTech over the last 5 years has played a big part of that. And I suppose the final thought on this is, we're probably just scratching the surface. When you think about the tools that are at our disposition around machine learning, big data, natural language processing, we haven't even really scratched the surface of those tools yet. But we've come a long way just sort of using basic web tools to date.
Right. No, this is a great perspective, John. You're right. We haven't scratched the surface yet, and depends on the journey of the carriers where they are. Shifting my question from technology to people and going back to Jackie, question for you. While we have all the technology in the world, how do we really incentivize, as an employer in your current role, how are you incentivizing millennials, Gen Zs to invest more in retirement or think about retirement? Again, at COVID, there are other expense pressures that they may have. So, what are the steps employers are taking, and specifically in your role, what do you see?
Yeah, it's an interesting demographic, of course, because millennials come to us with school debt typically that many of us didn't have to see at the level that they do. And how do you get them to focus on their retirement when they're trying to pay off $300,000 in school loans? So that's clearly been, something of an issue. We know we're with Fidelity as our record keeper, and one of the things that we're looking at is how could we possibly support millennials, Gen Zers in school loan repayment options. That is now something that certain organizations are looking at. Logistically, it's one of those that sounds better than it is till you start to try to implement it. But certain organizations are doing that, and I think that's something that we'll look at. Of course, the individuals will lose their company match that would be part of their retirement, but they would potentially be able to support some of the loan repayment that they have. And so that's one avenue. Another avenue we have is we auto enroll everyone. We have over 90% enrollment in our 401k, which is pretty outstanding for an organization. And I think in many ways, forcing people to opt out, forcing them to think through what that might mean is also another method to try to encourage those. And then it's education. How do you, just like a young person buying life insurance, how do you get them to buy life insurance when they're not thinking about retirement and they're not thinking about, their future demise? And so how do you get them to understand that that's a worthwhile investment? And I've actually found a lot of millennials and Gen Zers are pretty focused on their future, and many learned from their parents. Many saw what 2008 did to their families. So I haven't found, from my experience, it being terribly difficult to get them to focus and participate. And we know if they start even small, young, it will grow quickly over the years that they need. So, we'll continue to support, educate, and guide them as best we can.
Right, right. Oh, that's excellent. That's good to know that it's not that big a critical problem at your end to
Mm.
advise your employees on savings and educating them. So it's a good segue into a question for Deborah now. How to educate in this virtual world? So Deborah, a question for you is, retirement planning is a global trend and increasingly complex, as we all know. With this virtual world, this has to be done over Zoom or other virtual platforms.
Right. So I love.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love what Jackie said about. I actually think all of us are more aware of our own demise now, and how it may happen suddenly in ways that we just didn't think about before. So I think in that respect, life insurance and all of that has grown in value because everyone's more open to the fact that anything can happen at any time. Here's our challenge. Our clients, all of us on the Zoom call today, we are not only more distracted, we're now more distant, and we're very distressed. We are in a pandemic, and this is extremely stressful. So the brain science on this is clear. It is harder for any of us to listen. It's harder for us to learn, and it's harder for us to remember anything that we've heard. And that's our brains on stress. So the new skill for all of us is going to be visual storytelling and virtual, and being able to be virtual communicators. 70 to 90% of the information we take in through our brains, or taken through our eyes. We all take all our information through our brains. So 70, 90% of the information we take in through our eyes. So when we're on a Zoom call today, all of us are struggling to listen, understand, and remember what we're talking about. We're going to have to change how we're communicating. We're going to have to make it much more visual if we have any hope that people have clear takeaways when we walk away. So the big skill is going to be how do you deliver information with big impact on a small screen? That's going to be a big shift.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And while the technology exists to virtually educate, the product itself has to be exciting enough, right? And that brings me to my next question for Matt. Do you see limitations with the existing retirement products, and what potential changes do you suggest to increase participation or membership, especially with the new generation, with Gen Zs, millennials? Matt, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's great to see everyone, and I feel like, especially based on the breakout, I'm going to learn a lot as well. I'm with Rohit at Infosys now, building out our retirement center of excellence to help other firms sort of accelerate their retirement businesses. And sort of, you'll hear me reference Vanguard a bit because I was with Vanguard until about 8 weeks ago. I think there's a. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Sorry, Rohit. I saw you.
Yes, we can.
Very good. 8, 9, whatever it's been, months into Zoom, I still get nervous, but I haven't figured the mute button out. So I think I'll give a two-part answer to this. I'll come back to what Jackie said, and there's a lot in the product space that isn't new. It's nothing groundbreaking. It's nothing earth-shattering, but sort of rigorous adoption of it is what's going to drive outcomes. So I think what you talked about, Jackie, auto enrollment is by far one of the best things that we can do, especially with young people, to get them into retirement planning early. I think these are Vanguard stats. So if you go to Fidelity, they'll have a slightly different set of data, but they're all directionally similar, no matter which sort of big organization you're looking at. If you look at plans where there's auto enrollment, you've got a 92% participation rate, or something right around 60% for plans that don't have auto enrollment. You look at that in the context of millennials and Gen Z folks under the age of 35. The difference is still 90, but it's the other side of it is closer to 45. So by auto enrolling sort of younger people, you're almost doubling the probability that they're going to contribute. And all the data says they contribute at much higher rates too. So I think helping plan sponsors is, again, in the defined contribution space, rigorously adopt what we know is best practice is I think probably the single best thing we can do. And then beyond that, getting folks to default into some sort of advised model is really powerful. And that can be a pretty wide range of things. Target date funds have been growing in popularity for a long time, and for good reasons. They're a really simple, low-cost way of providing light touch advice. Increasingly, digital advice offerings inside the context of a plan, or human digital hybrid advice offerings in the context of a plan, are available as default options with big retirement providers and with some of the startups that are out there. And especially in times like this, those can be great sort of not just help folks move to more logical sort of investment allocations, but help folks with some of the complex behavioral sides of things and the emotional reactions that can come during times of stress. In terms of new products, there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot of things that are out there. I do think, Jackie, I'll play off you again, but I think one of the realities, especially with young people, especially in the COVID environment, we've got to recognize is that part of a reason folks struggle to save for retirement is lack of money. Like, millennials are the largest and the best educated generation around. They're also the most indebted. And a lot of that is college loans. The cost of college has gone up much faster than the sort of wage-based, much faster than the cost of just about anything else other than medical care. And that makes it hard for them to contribute. So I think companies are increasingly trying to find ways to bridge a range of different financial wellness offers for employees that span retirement and some of the other financial aspects of people's life. Some of these things will require some sort of policy shifts, but enabling the match in the context of 401k student loan pay down programs are some of the things that we talk about a lot as potential mechanisms down the road for helping folks get invested early and to stick to that.
Right. Thank you, Matt, for that response. Good to hear that. Question for Victor. Victor, you have been doing a lot of research. What do you think, and what are in your studies? What are the emerging issues and topics in retirement planning and behavioral finance research? What are you seeing? Any thoughts on that?
I would say one of the emerging things is thinking about people in terms of how we communicate with them. First would be something in normal finance, which would be the idea is that people we're predisposed to be spenders. So if you're meeting with a client, you discuss with them, find out things they like to do, operationalize those things as goals. And when you go to sell something such as an annuity product, if you tell somebody, the research shows you'll have $2,000 a month in income at age 65, maybe only about 25% of the people will take that particular investment. But if you frame the discussion and you link that to say somebody likes to play golf, they want to go on cruises, they want to buy a car, you say you can have $2,000 a month and you'll be able to go on 2 extra cruises in retirement per year, people are more likely to save for the investment. And so they reduce the spending today with the likelihood they'll achieve the goal tomorrow. So that framing and that ability to, so think about, we're predisposed because we suffer from self-control bias. I love my pizza, my pasta. So if I don't eat that and I try to eat more healthy, I lose weight and I live longer. Well, it's the same thing with money, sex, and music, is that whole point of the brain. Other thing to also think about is people are different types of learners. I know most of you will work with technology. I've been teaching college for 25 years. And even the students who have grown up on technology, simplicity and writing on the board, they still use notebooks. They're still writing with pen. Depending on what you're teaching, who you're communicating with, there are several different categories of learners. So one best way of presenting things and communicating to your clients is not going to solve a magic bullet. So that's another thing. That learning process is, some people are going to enjoy technology. Some people, it's a supplement to learning. I think is another important thing the research has been showing. And we're currently in this environment. We're in this pandemic. So let's think about the last 20 years. We've had essentially 3 black swan events. We had an internet bubble that burst. We had the financial crisis, And so have people learned there's a hangover effect that people are going to suffer from even once we get through this pandemic. So thinking about if a person is well engaged and planned for retirement, it's making only minimal adjustments. It's the high degree of people who have 2/3 of the American public has financial debt, has credit card debt. Only about 50% of the American households have money in stock market or stock mutual funds. So it's not just a retirement planning issue, it's a financial education issue as well.
That's a great perspective, Victor. And I agree, it has to be a balance of both, and it's a broader issue, just not retirement planning. Going back to Jackie, Jackie, question for you is, we have heard different thoughts, but coming back to a workplace, how workplace do you think would be, would it be more important or less important for retirement planning post-pandemic? Should the HR benefits team be actively involved or actively encouraging employees to take retirement checkups? What's your thought around that?
So it's an interesting thought, right? Now that work is home and home is work in a lot of ways, the identification and the definition of a workplace has changed. One of the approaches we've taken from an HR perspective is wherever you're standing and working, you still work for an organization. And in my mind, that's your workplace. And so I still see Nassau and the HR team and the benefits team as having an obligation to support our employees through this pandemic in particular. And then, of course, once we're finally out of it. And so one of the things we've made a concerted effort in doing is staying in very close touch with employees as much as we could through education, through seminars, through WebExes. We tried to have something, every other week or so, at least a couple times a month, so that we were constantly connecting to the individuals. And then in terms of how the obligation of the workplace and how it would support individuals with retirement, I think we have as much of an obligation today as ever. And that the workplace for many is one of the only avenues to help people really plan for retirement. I mean, how much can you put away in an IRA, right? $5,500 a year. You can do $19,000 in your 401k if you can afford that. And so I think maybe what a workplace looks like right now might feel different because we're sitting in our kitchens, although I'm in the office today, but not every day. I still think the workplace is the workplace, and an organization and any employer will continue to need and support their employees.
Right. No, that's great, Jackie, and I think Nassau and your group is doing a great job. A question for John. John, again, more of a technology question. With remote working, digital tools are becoming more and more important. They're widely used and adopted. And as I think in the previous question you had mentioned, there's a lot to cover. We haven't scratched the surface. But so far, what you have seen in terms of what has worked better in the pandemic than the pre-pandemic scenario in terms of technology or tools or digital tools?
Yeah, I addressed this a little bit earlier, but I mean, what's been interesting is just the demographics we're seeing engage have shifted, right? From younger folks to sort of a more representative of the American population. What's been interesting is things that were really sort of exciting a few years ago, chatbots as an example. I'm not sure the chatbot stock is still as high as it was a few years ago. We're seeing that built in less and less in interface. It's a lot of keystrokes, things like that, where, simple, streamlined, intuitive user experiences are really a main focal point. And I think that's been a general trend in technology, is that the user experience has become the most, or certainly one of the most important aspects of any new technology. That's the difference between people using it and not using it, people calling in and asking for support from a call center, people trusting it or not trusting it. One thing that I think is interesting, and coming back to some of the comments Vic made, is when we start to think about the way retirement is positioned and, opt out versus opt in. And then, Vic touched a little bit on sort of the psychology and the dopamine rush you get from spending. But, is there a future where some of these products start to shift, where you get sort of micro rewards, incentives, nudges for doing the things that are right for you in the long run? Hey, by saving today, I get a small dividend, or by saving for the future, I get a small dividend today, or I get a small incentive or bonus today. But think about, how do you gamify, reward, and nudge people into doing the right behaviors in the future?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think John, a gamification is a great way to incentivize. Sometimes the challenge that we have seen is gamification really requires instant gratification, and this probably doesn't happen with retirement, right? So that could be a limitation there. But great idea, great thoughts around that. Thanks, Debra. Coming back to you, you are an expert in coaching the CXOs how to make an impact in the virtual world. I was going through your LinkedIn profile. It's great. But what's your advice to the CEOs about ensuring their online presence and how it's fully optimized, and why does that matter so much now for them?
I do. Before I jump on that, I want to say one word about gamification, because I love this notion of micro nudges. We rolled out 66,000 seats of gamified cybersecurity training this year for a major insurance carrier. And it's the first time they ever had people asked to take compliance training twice because you unlocked rewards and water bottles, and it didn't have to be big, but we designed it sort of loosely based on Game of Thrones, and you worked your way through 5 kingdoms, and it was just incredibly cool. And I think that we could apply that to life insurance anytime, right? Or any savings, retirement, any savings where you get some micro nudges. I think that's absolutely critical. And we're going to just rethink how we're engaging people. I say we're out to rid the world of bad corporate training, because no one's going to sit through the stuff that we're trying to make people sit through today. So I had to say something about the gamification. I think you're totally on the right track. I think there's 3 things we all have to be thinking about when we're thinking about communicating this level of complexity to distressed audiences. One, and Norm Trainer talks about this, people decide to do business with you based on 3 things. And it used to be those introductions, and those still matter a lot. But now if you get an introduction, you look someone up online, and it is the first impression. So people are looking you up on your online profile, and too often it's kind of been a bad resume where if your profile today says, I've been in business for 25 years, people don't care. We just don't care how long you've been in business. So those first 6 words matter a lot. And we say, don't tell me what you do, tell me what you love about what you do. So whether you're a C-suite executive or you're a frontline insurance person, you've got to rethink your online presence, because that's how you're connecting with your clients. And then you have to figure out how you're engaging with them virtually. And it's going to be on platforms now, because I'm not running into you at a conference, or I'm not, having dinner with you or meeting you on the golf course right now. So staying top of mind virtually is going to be a critical skill. There's just no getting around that. But I was coaching an executive the other day who wanted to lead with, my team thinks I'm amazing. And I said, I don't think so. But even if they do, you don't want to lead with that. So your profile has to be, we've been focused on making our profile all about making us credible, when it should be all about making us relatable and likable, because we've got to tell the powerful story of us if we have any hope that people are going to take that meeting with us.
And Debra, how are you measuring the success of this, in terms of more likability, if you will, of profile?
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things we're doing. We have a lot of data around a 5-star profile. That first person summary of the number of unfriendly looking people in insurance on their profile is amazing to me. So just actually helping people make their visual story online more powerful. But then if you don't know what your SSI score is, we were talking about that earlier for those of you who got on late, but you can go to LinkedIn, you can Google LinkedIn social selling index score, and it will give you a score. You're trying to shoot for at least 60 or 70. Norm probably has the highest score here at 82 now, but thinking through, it's judging you on the size of your network, whether you're engaging with insights, your profile, a number of things. It's an algorithm. And if you don't know what that is, then that's a good start to figure out your own score, figure out your team score. But thinking about our online presence is the first component to doing business in a digital world or virtual world. Right.
That's interesting. Thanks. Matt, question for you. Next one is, again, talking about technology, retirement planning. Question is, how has online retirement planning engagement changed during the pandemic? Do you think the interactions have increased? They have decreased? They are the same? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm actually just really glad you didn't ask me about my LinkedIn profile and how bad it is. Deborah might get a call after this. So there's definitely been a broad uptick in sort of online engagement. That's not going to surprise anybody in the middle of the pandemic. Nobody's in person anymore. Yeah, financial services broadly, to just play off the commentary and gamification, you've seen a huge uptick in brokerage account openings. Now, those aren't always oriented towards retiring. Those are people investing for lots of different reasons. But whether you like Robinhood, whether you buy their model, whether you dislike them, I think they've demonstrated pretty clearly, like, gamification of investing, like, has made it a lot more enticing and exciting to a lot of folks. And there may be better ways to do certain things that may have introduced some bad behaviors. We're gonna have that debate offline. But there's certainly a lot of folks are flocking online and doing financial activities in ways they didn't back in January of this year because of the pandemic. Paul, you said at the beginning, one of the things that both online and sort of phone-based interactions, a lot of folks are thinking about right now in retirement space is taking money out of their retirement account. Now, I think you cited the 27-30% stats. People are thinking about it. I saw a stat earlier today that said 35 or 40% are. A lot of people are thinking about it. The good news is, while people are going online, calling to call centers, they're not taking action on that at the levels that people were afraid of. So while people are kicking around this idea of taking money out of their account, it's only, Fidelity and Vanguard both are at about 4.5%. Normally you'd be about 2% sort of hardship or early withdrawals, which is good news. So folks are behaving responsibly. This is Vanguard data again. The other good news is that folks aren't actually changing their investment allocations as much as you might think. So they're engaging in their accounts, they're paying more attention to what they're doing. But the big worries I think a lot of us had at the beginning of this pandemic about folks fleeing to cash, taking lots of money out of their accounts, aren't materializing to quite the same level we were worried about, which sort of, I think, still a lot of reasons to be thoughtful and concerned, and try to help folks, especially those of us who are in HR positions. But by the same token, we're seeing a lot of folks actually behave in really responsible, thoughtful ways that are setting them up to be more secure in retirement, which I think is good news for a lot of individuals and good news for the country.
Right, Matt. That's a good perspective, being responsible, but at the same time, it's the need of the hour too, and that's probably my next question to Victor. Victor, baby boomers, that generation, are dipping into some of the retirement savings, especially now. We are seeing job losses, and that's adding to a lot of financial burden. What's your advice, for them, so they can have a very stable future? What do you think?
I just wanted to comment on the idea that a lot of people haven't pulled money out of their retirement accounts. I think part of that was because it happened so quickly. If you compare that to the financial crisis, which was more of a 12 to 18 month event, it was more panic because it was more of a longer term domino effect, and people did a lot more damage, was because they had the opportunity to do a lot more damage. So that's one thing to keep in mind behaviorally. In terms of what are the category of clients that you have? If somebody has actually been currently using a financial planner and has a personality to be planned out, that means they probably already have estate planning, they have everything worked out, and that's more of a minimal conversation for somebody who has good financial health. And then probably the other category of client would be people who are coming in for the first time, who maybe have been doing a good amount of 401k contributions, but they don't have wills and other issues like that. And I think that's where the opportunity is to really just even going into explaining the financial planning process and getting them to come in, getting them engaged. Because again, in the breakout session I said is we've had 3 black swan events in the last 20 years. They are becoming more and more frequent. So take this as an opportunity to teach your clients, but we're still in this. So after you have gone through this, have a post-mortem with them, discuss with them, and try to prepare for the next aspect of this, just looking at risk tolerance, all the products you're offering, and so forth. In terms of the baby boomers who are now panicking, again, if they haven't been saving and they're part of the higher group of people who don't have enough savings and retirements, then I don't have a simple answer to that. I mean, they have not saved. And also there's a segment of people who are just gamblers, you know. And the other category of those people are, I know people currently who have $100,000 income from pension plans, and they're still broke because they're spending $130,000 a year. So it's trying to just get back to basics, financial education, affecting their behavior, and accepting you're not going to be able to, like I can't save every student, you cannot save every client. So trying to find the people that you can impact the most, change behavior, and be a coach. Not there's a new area called financial therapy that I'm partially involved in, and so the people who have compulsive gambling, compulsive trading, and hoarding, those people are probably most in this audience are not going to be able to deal with. It's finding the biases that you think people suffer from, and then trying to have an engagement in just changing those behaviors. And that's much deeper conversation, but I think it's really what is your skill set as advisors? What can your organization really do to change behavior? And the people who are more on the fringes, that's a much deeper conversation.
Right. No, absolutely. Thanks, Victor. Absolutely. Bringing more discipline and is key to this. From the very start. So this is a very broad and great perspective. I think I'm at the end of my panel discussion. Thanks to all the panelists. Great advice, great discussion. I'll hand it over back to Ramsey. There are some audience questions too. So hopefully, Ramsey, you would take us through the audience questions for the panelists.
Happy to do so. So Rohit, thank you very much for your leadership in the conversation. And I think you brought out a lot of terrific issues. I'll make one comment. Vic, you were talking about 3 black swans in the last 20 years. So I started my Wall Street career roughly in 94, 95. I count like 8 black swans. You just mentioned the really big ones, but you can add the Greek crisis, you can add 9/11, you can add long-term capital. So there's a lot of them. It's been remarkable. They happen way more frequently than we might expect. So anyway, with that, let's get to some of the questions here. So, and the first one I'm going to point to John Cooper. This one actually comes from Paul, but you mentioned earlier that you're starting to see more complex products being brought into an online distribution paradigm. Are there any examples that have surprised you that have been sort of pushing the envelope in recent months and years?
Yeah, I'd say a few years ago, what we'd always hear is no one will ever buy anything more complex than a term product online. Now we've got 2 different clients that are bringing out products that are way more complex than a term product. And what's interesting is the feedback you hear from end consumers when they're looking at these are permanent products or products with sort of interesting features attached to them. But what's interesting is when you look at consumer feedback, a good UX, they're highlighting different aspects of, I'm so happy I don't feel pressure from a broker to buy this. I feel like I can make the decision in my own room and, ask the right people without feeling any pressure. But that the emotional decision side, the emotional side of the decision-making process is quite different, where they feel more empowered and less pressure in that sort of direct-to-consumer environment. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, but if I did, I would envision this evolving in a way where the future might mean that advisors are not necessarily being disintermediated, but they're now having more sophisticated tools to help with decision support or sophisticated tools to help them sell digitally at scale to more people with less handholding and less face-to-face interactions.
All right, so that's a nice segue into the next question, which is from Craig at Forest Lake. Craig, do you want to ask your question to the audience? All right, well, I will happily do it. So the next sort of part of the thought process of what you said, Jonathan, is really thinking about how do we manage the tension between the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things. And I open up to anybody else that would like to comment, but I think many of this on this discussion would agree with you that there's lots of benefit from some more electronic choices, but there's this constant sort of ongoing tension with the existing channels. What do you think are the best ways to handle that on a going forward basis? That's for you, John.
Okay, sorry about the dog barking.
No worries.
I think the pandemic has brought that to a head. This has become an inflection point where the old way of doing things is much harder to do. So to some degree, there's extrinsic factors that are causing this shift for everyone, and I think that competition is going away naturally because the old way just doesn't work with social distancing.
Got it. Okay, thank you. All right, so we've got a number of questions here that are focused at Debra. So Debra, you were in the crosshairs. First off, what are some of the best ways you think people can host effective Zoom meetings? Right, it's become a part of our daily lives. But what are some good places for people to start?
So I love this. And a little bit about my background is my PhD is in education, but I wrote my dissertation on the powerful micro storytelling. This is why I got excited when people started talking about micro nudges and all of that. So I think that to do this well, we have to start to apply narrative to our Zoom meetings. So here's what I mean by that. We have to, if you think about reading a good book or any kind of good story, you have to have a powerful opening. Advisors are going to have to learn how to have a powerful ending. There's small things we can do. Never end a Zoom meeting on questions. If you are working one-on-one with the client, you want to own the ending. So you want to leave the client with what you most need them to remember. We're conveying such complex information. We're going to have to convey it in ways that are much more powerful visually. So we call it a 3-second rule. If I'm showing you a slide in a Zoom meeting in my presentation, if I can't make sense of it in 3 seconds, I have to redesign it. People are going to have to, when I talk about design for attention, you think about a small screen. There's nothing worse than putting something up on a Zoom call and saying to the client, I know you can't see this, but the client's peering at your financial data and you've already lost me. So we're going to have to design for content for small screens. And that's what I mean by in ways that make big impacts. But I'll tell you, in my average webinar right now, I go through 230 slides in about 40 minutes. And our brains are wired for this kind of visual storytelling. We don't sit around and watch TV with a lot of talking heads for a long time with no visuals. We don't sit around and, we're just not wired for this. Our brains are wired for movement. That's a big new skill for advisors. The new skill for all of us is going to be adapting how we convey information on a small screen for the way our brains are wired for taking in information on a small screen. It's not a small new skill either. We rolled out, we have a big tech company that 56,000 people are taking our training in how to write for a small screen because everything has to be short, organized, and skimmable. And now it's going to be how do you communicate on a small screen. One final thing is the other brain science that I'm finding fascinating right now is we can't read facial expressions very well on a small screen. Look at how small we all are. And so people are experimenting with how you use your hands more and all of that, because we can only we're not even taking in half of the information we typically take in through our eyes because we don't have the full body language. So there's a lot of brain science, a lot of studies happening right now on what the new communication skills are. But if we're not thinking about that and training our advisors on how to do it, we're going to miss big opportunities because the complexity is going up. The distress levels are going up, so it's harder to take it in. And our skills are going to have to change if we have any hope of driving action.
So you've given us some great sort of heuristics to work with. Are there any examples of people or companies you think are doing a good job of it? Whether, I mean, probably some of your clients, but where can we look to see some great examples of accomplishing these rules of thumb?
Well, here's what I love. So the clients that we're working with now who really get it recognize that casual does not mean careless. We were actually, Paul and I had a great conversation about this in our last webinar, right? Where these days, if you get on a Zoom meeting and you have on a suit and tie, your client it's gonna feel incongruous, because we all know we're all sitting in our spare rooms trying to do business. So we have to, I'm actually getting ready to write a blog post called Why Your Business Suit May Be Costing You Business. I think a lot of this are clients who are saying, we're going to do wildly new things. So I will tell you that cyber training, we launched it with Nationwide Insurance and this past year, and they were willing to do some incredibly creative gamification. We took Nationwide employees and dressed them up like Vikings. I was approving ravens in my budget. And then they showed up. People showed up dressed as Vikings. This was before, of course, COVID. But you could take all of this online. It's all gamified. You got names like John the Defender to work your way through the training. And it won a top international compliance training award because Nationwide said, you know what? We can't do this the same way anymore. We're going to have to change how people learn online, or they're just not going to tune in. And I think that's true for client meetings. I think it's true for training. I think it's true for every conversation we have. We're going to have to do more to make it meaningful. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah,
but
thank you.
I will say on that question thing, though, it's my favorite tip, because there's nothing worse, right, than leading a webinar or saying, okay, any final questions, and no one has them. And then you're like, okay, everybody, bye. So if you own the ending, if you know what you want to walk off with, then it's just a much better way to end. The client will remember that and remember what you said when you wrapped up. So I always say, I'm going to wrap up, but first, what questions do you have? That's my fun tip for the day on a Zoom meeting.
Great. Thank you. All right. So another question that came up was from Matt. So Robinhood has obviously captured some of these gamification principles that Debra just talked about and others have mentioned. Are there any other people that you see are doing that are doing this right or doing this well?
It's a great question. In the retirement space, I actually don't think this is something that any of the really big providers have cracked the code on yet. I think there's some great UXs, there's some great apps, some great interfaces. Voya just rolled out a really novel new training platform, which is interesting and exciting. Some of the startups like Betterment, increasingly moving into, they've got phenomenal UX, phenomenal engagement platforms. So I think folks do aspects of it well. Yeah, I think we've got to look, at least in the sort of the defined contribution space, a little bit left and right to see really great sort of gamification. You think about some of the aggregators of personal finance apps like Mint or You Need a Budget, where sort of the interfaces, the nudges, the reminders are great and easy to use and delightful. Like I think about every morning I pull up my Starbucks app and I go to Starbucks and they prompt me with stars every single day, and I buy more coffee because of it. I don't even always understand like how I'm earning these things, but yeah, I think if we start to look left and right, we see some better examples that we can begin to emulate. Some of that is sort of the core technology some of our platforms have been built on are more challenging to build mobile apps and sort of nudges and user interfaces off of. But clearly that's something a lot of firms are investing in right now and making progress in.
Can I just say one quick thing about that, Matt? I think you're so right, but I think that the retirement industry should learn from Noom, the app that's trying to help you lose weight, but they do all this nudging and you get, great data that's broken down super easy, and you can see your progress, and then you should get some micro nudges. There's no reason you can't get a little bit now for saving a lot later. So I totally agree with John on that too.
Right.
So,
I think just a touch on this, because we do a ton of gamification on the life side and some on the annuity side, but there's one is sort of the game elements of points and rewards and all that, but there's also a way you could structure financially structure retirements in a way that there's a carrot today and a bigger for saving tomorrow. That I think it's really interesting when you start to think about like, what's my dividend for tomorrow? That gives me an incentive financially to put some money in the bank for, when I'm 65.
Hi, this is Victor. I also wanted to just comment that there is research that shows that by people being able to go online and having a certain type of personality profile, essentially people who tend to be more outgoing and who tend to be extroverts also tend to be more overconfident. So making the availability of more trading for a certain segment of investors or really traders, they wind up trading more, they wind up being more overconfident, and because they're not really investing, they're getting in and out of stocks and they actually get lower returns because they're incurring more expenses and they're missing the upside. So there has to, I just wanted to interject that technology is not going to save everybody, but for some, it's actually going to work against them. And that's why when you mention having incentives that are more long-term to help minimize the trading behavior and lessen the overconfident and avoiding overtrading is very important to consider.
I also think just in terms of, sorry, Ramsey, just in terms of millennials and Gen Zers that we were talking about earlier is it's got to be simple, it's got to be fast, and it's got to be easy, or they're likely not going to engage in it. And that's just, if it can be if the gamification is easy on the app and they can access something quickly and get their response quickly enough, you may see some, more takers. But I think that concept of ease and, the digital quick accessibility is going to be pretty critical.
Jackie, I think you're so right. And I would add to that, we always say mobile, custom, fast, and easy, and then engaging, virtual, inspiring, and fun. And I think those are all of us are expecting it now.
Right, exactly.
And what I do love is someone said earlier that, this is all generations are now adopting new technology at the speed that we didn't think we'd see. And, it took 10 years to get people to adopt social at this speed, right? So I think now we just have to lean in on the fact that there's no excuse anymore for advisors saying, well, my clients are older because I'm doing Zoom meetings with my 87-year-old mom. So I think that's where we are now. But I agree with you totally on the custom, fast, and easy. Lower the barrier to entry and raise the bar on production.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing, just to come back to like where we started some of the conversation. So much of this is about how do we get folks to take action. I think Vic sort of went in this direction. A lot of success in this space is also making inaction the right choice for a lot of people by defaulting them into the right things. Making inaction a path that actually leads to success as opposed to requiring action to get folks to success. And I think for a large swath of folks, especially millennials, that's as important as trying to get everything right to get folks to engage in all the ways you just talked about, Deborah.
Yeah, I mean, look at the donor. What happens when you ask people to donate organs? They've learned a lot about the power of opting out versus opting in.
All right. Great interaction, great discussion. Let's keep it going. Matt, I totally agree with you on the Starbucks app. I think one of the things that I find fascinating about that app isn't just that it is that there's sort of static gamification. It moves the bar against you every day. Every day gives you a different set of incentives, the different product, different bar to reach. It's fun to be involved in knowing that I'm being played. And it's been very interesting. So with that, I'm going to take it in a totally different direction here. So Jessica Fail asked a very interesting question, which was with this huge tsunami of various types of technology that have come into our lives, is there potentially a place to go back to sort of more old-fashioned ways of communicating with our clients, whether it's snail mail or gifts and other sorts of things that are in a more traditional wrapper? Any thoughts on that to the panel? And actually, before we go, Jessica, did I capture that right? Are there any other elements of that question that you'd like reflected?
No, I think you captured it. I'm just wondering, how do we have a personal touch when we're communicating with our customers when they're getting so much information electronically. And if they get one more email today, it will just be the breaking point. So how do we personalize our approach? And will it be a comeback of old-fashioned ways of snail mail and things like that?
This is Vic. I was going to just also comment on, we talk about nudging for changing behavior. Once you identify somebody with a bad bias, you then trying to maintain that change in positive behavior. It has to be done for different types of communications. So that's snail mail, that's postcards, telephone calls, text messaging, email, Zoom calls, meeting in person. So I think it's an all above attack of using both. I don't think the conversation, especially I'm dealing with students who are all 21, 22, and I actually this semester, I was only one of a few faculty at my institution. I did all my classes in person, and the students were so happy because they don't want to take online classes, and they're the technology ones. So I think it's really thinking about this in a situational perspective on, for certain things, they want to do technology. For other things, it's still the old way will still apply for certain types of activities. So it's not either or, it's really what is the situation and designing your perspective from that. I think that's one thing I've noticed.
I totally agree, Vic. I think the pandemic stuck us all in a particular place, and we had no choice but to do only that, and that we've come to realize that a variety, I have people telling me they miss their commute. Who would think anybody would miss their commute, sitting in the car, sitting in traffic? My own son said, gosh, I really miss the subway in New York City and all the people. And I think it's just this idea that we've had to be so one-dimensional because we're just stuck at home. And so it will be so welcome when we can have a variety. And I think we still have to communicate with individuals on a personal level. Even a small thing like, as an organization, we sent a gift out mid-pandemic to the entire company. And it was this little well box that had some little trinkets. And we heard from more people than I've ever heard from anybody relative to just a little thing. And I think it was because they felt connected to, they knew they were being thought about, and it was different. It was just different than what we'd all been experiencing. So Vic, I completely agree. It's going to be a combination.
I also think that fun is going to matter a lot because we're all, stuck at home. And so I will tell you, I'm so impressed with, I was working with the CMO at Ohio Health. We gave a talk last week at HCIC, and she had a team meeting where she turned herself into Nemo, the fish, and did backflips and, just talked and tried to engage the team, and people loved it. They were just anything to just, shake it up a little and make people laugh in the middle of all of this, I think is appreciated. So that isn't a handwritten note, which I also agree can be powerful, but it is a little bit of just anything different to make me laugh or capture my attention is going to matter a lot, I think, right now.
Now, I'll comment that on the other side of the coin, we also have to think about how quickly, this Zoom meeting is going to feel antiquated in 3 years from now. Right? How long will it take until we're in sort of these immersive digital experiences where we still feel like we have that face-to-face connection, but we're sitting in, our spare bedroom. That'll be the other side of this discussion.
Oh, this is so true. Don't you feel like, I feel like Twitter came out in 2008 and we were teaching it. I was at Ohio State in 2008, and you think about how long ago and how old that technology seems now. I mean, we're just going to laugh at this year, we're going to look back on what we're doing right now and laugh, because we'll all be in the same room and we'll have our avatars or whatever that's going to be. It's not going to feel like this at all. So I think that's going to be a big 2 years from now. I think even 2 years from now, we're going to laugh at what we did this year.
So we have a question from Cheryl O'Connor for Jackie. So Cheryl, take it away. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I didn't think I would be called on. So Jackie, I used to work in the ERISA side, and why do you think that why aren't more employers using auto enroll and target date QDIAs? I mean, that seems like a no-brainer to me. Why is that not being adopted more widely?
It's a really good question. I've been fortunate to have been with organizations where I've made sure we were using those tools. And I don't recall whether it was John or Matt who said earlier that we've got to get out of our old ways. And I think in some ways, you set up your 401k. It's been in existence for however long it's been in existence. It's a bit of a project to make changes. And so I have to, in part, chalk it up to, a little bit of complacency and not, in a sense, getting with the times. I also think some HR leaders may be hesitant to force individuals into something as opposed to giving them a choice. And so this idea that I'm telling my employees that's what they're doing as opposed to giving them the option, I think that's changing, opting out. The target funds, I can't really understand why organizations wouldn't utilize those. This idea of especially younger people not thinking and not necessarily knowing what they should be investing in to be able to prepare for their future 50 years later, whereas target funds are ideal for that. It's the concept of, having someone manage your funds for you without essentially an advisor doing it. So it's, I wish I had a better sense of why organizations aren't doing it. I think it probably, falls more into just stuck in their old ways and the logistical challenges of making a change, which are doable, but change, a lot of people don't like change.
And I
add to that,
I just wanted to
go ahead,
chime
Vic.
in that also. I've sat in on I've been on in retirement committees at different universities and colleges, and for those people who are fiduciaries and actually voting from HR, I notice they tend to be very risk averse. So they look at the benchmarks of what other institutions are doing, and since they don't want to take chances, if the other benchmarks have not moved in the peer group, they tend not to want to move on any decision. So I think it's a degree of risk aversion and really status quo bias, just to give you that perspective as well.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Bring up one more point. Jackie, you must be familiar with the Market Basket suit up in Massachusetts, where they were being put into a profit sharing plan, and the younger, it was basically a very conservative omnibus account. And so all of these younger employees are suing and winning their case because they're saying you put us into something that wasn't aggressive enough. So I think you're going to see more things like that are going to maybe wake up the HR department a little bit. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the idea of, again, telling people where they should go, we still want it to be their choice. And I know annuities, the addition of annuities into 401ks was something that has certainly been on the radar, in particular for my organization, because we sell annuities, and the question of how do you manage that? And as one of the things I thought of from an HR perspective was, of course I want to support Nassau, and of course I would want Nassau's products available, but do I want it in my employees' 401k? Or do I want it in everybody else's 401k as an option? Because I was in the energy space for a while, so it harkened back to what Enron, not necessarily the same thing, but the idea of encouraging people to support your organization with their retirement dollars. Is there, it's not exactly the same as the market basket issue, but this idea of guiding people in a way that you, as an organization, can do well from.
Right. Well, thank you everybody for those comments. I think we're right at the end of this segment. There's one question I'm going to throw out, and hopefully maybe Deborah can send it around to all of us later. So Lori Black asked, "How do you turn yourself into Nemo?" Which could be, of the many value-added things that we've learned today, could be super effective. So thanks for that. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Paul Tyler.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, friends. And thanks, everybody. I thought this was fascinating discussion. Learned a lot, took a lot of notes. And I think just to kind of wrap this up from my perspective, we will write this up. We will send it around and want all of your comments. Joy, Norm, Yuka, we'll come back to you. We just kind of ran out of time. Wanted to pull you into the discussion, get your perspective as well on this. What are my takeaways? Okay, how do we get people to think really more positive, start to think positively? How do we get them to do the right thing in this new world? Well, number one is, and Debra, you said it's designed for the small screen. Yeah, we are in a mobile first world. I just saw a stat, 25% of Black Friday sales came over via smartphones. Like what? I look at our traffic on our website, and of people 55 and up, John, I'm sure this is no surprise for you, 60% of our traffic is coming off of smartphones, right? When did that happen? I think we are in this competing for attention today, but I think it's not, Matt, I'll put you on the spot. I don't think it's Vanguard versus Fidelity anymore. I think it's like Vanguard versus TikTok. If we're playing on the screen, it's how many minutes, we all get these screen reminders from Apple saying what percentage of time do we spend on our screen. We're competing for those minutes, and it's with a bunch of things that have absolutely nothing to do with retirement business. Micro reinforcement, John, man, we are living in the laboratory, right, of micro nudges. Noom, I love the Noom example, right? How do we, who's doing this? Who's pushing the envelope on creating good, positive behavior? Anthony, you mentioned Robin. What does Robinhood for retirement planning look like today? We do have some startups we're going to bring into the next session that'll talk a little bit about that. I think I heard, John, you'd mentioned, I heard in a couple other topics. Norm, we talked a little bit about this in our breakout session, but there's kind of a shift in sort of emotional connection with people and consumers. And I think we're moving rapidly from a world where it was about pressure, timing, putting people, it's more about empowering people. Okay, but then how do you empower people, but get them to do things that they should be doing for themselves, not just think about it, right? So I think we've got some interesting opportunities to do that. And I think, Vic, what I heard from you, very interesting, and we've talked about this with thinking through how we communicate with our agents, is everybody's got different learning styles. Some people listen, some people read, some people want to watch videos. I do think the fact we're on digital kind of opens the door for us to actually communicate in a lot more different ways than just if we send a brochure to an agent to carry to somebody's desk. So with that, listen, thank you very much. We'll be cutting this up as podcasts. And I said, writing our thoughts up, we're actually putting position papers out. We'll be sending out for people to, take a look and give us your thoughts. Lauren Ramsey, anything else?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to say thanks to everyone for leaning into the conversation today, sharing your ideas, your knowledge, your expertise. Jackie, John, Debra, Matt, Vic, thank you for sharing insights on the panel. Ramsey, thank you for facilitating. And as we continue to blend tech, education, behavioral mindset, we'll all together, I think, reimagine retirement, whether it's through action or inaction. So keep an eye out. We have upcoming forums on December 9, December 15, December 16. You will receive communication from us. And again, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. 4:30 on the dot. Enjoy your evening, and we'll see you soon.
We want to especially thank today's sponsors, Launch and Symetra.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nsre.com.